Hi, everyone. Welcome to My Imperfect Pursuits. I'm honored that you are listening or watching, however you might be tuning in. Thank you for being here. I am truly honored. The kids are on spring break this week, and I was not going to release an episode, but as God would have it, he likes to laugh at our plans, like not like in a mean way, but I think he's just like, y'all are silly. You have all these plans, but I've got something else for you. So he put this in my heart to talk about this to you, that I feel like that this needs to be said. This is something that I'm telling you that I'm just going to be honest here. It's been something he's been nudging me kind of quietly for some time. And being the gracious and kind God that he is, he's quietly and very gently been nudging me to talk about it, but I've been resisting. And so I think he's not so gently nudging anymore. It has really been in my heart to do this and to talk about this with you guys. Because I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to be very vulnerable today. And, with all that, of course, vulnerability, as we know, it takes a lot of courage. And we say that, right? But when it's actually put to the test, we realize how much courage it actually takes to be vulnerable. So I'm going to put a lot out there in this episode. If you tend to listen to your podcast in the car where little ears can hear, this may not be the podcast episode that you want to have. That you need to save this for a time where little ears are not around, because I will be talking about some things from my life that just isn't good for little kids just yet to hear. So just putting that out there and trying to give you a heads up. So the reason I wanted to put this out there is because even the way God put it in my heart, and I know if just one person benefits from what I have to say today, I mean, if it helps bring them back, and for them, if it allows them to stop believing that they are beyond repair and they learn just how good God's grace is, then it's all worth it, even if it's just one person. And if you know of someone, as you're gonna figure out what I'm saying. After I get through this, if you know of someone, you're like, wow, I know somebody that needs to hear this, I urge you to share it, because my testimony here, I know it is meant to help someone. And I don't care if they ever follow me on social media. I don't care if they ever listen to another podcast episode. That's not what this is about. But if this is the only thing, the only time they ever hear my voice, and it allows them to break free from the lies that the enemy likes to tell us, and the lies that the enemy's been telling them, then it's worth it. And that's why I'm saying, if as you're listening to this or after it's done, and you go, you know what, I do know somebody that needs to hear this, that she's been through this too, he's been through this too, whoever it may be, please share, because that is the power of people's testimony, the power of people's stories. We're going to bring to light what the enemy once kept in the dark. Because if we keep it in the dark, then it's full of shame, it's full of guilt, it's full of all the things that the enemy likes to just throw into our face. However, the way God works, nothing is too dark or too broken for him. And he wants us to bring it to the light. He wants us to bring it to him so he can say, hey, nothing's too broken. Nothing's too far gone for me. And in fact, this is the amazing part of how God works. He says, in fact, I can make this something good from this, even though you might be looking at it going, I don't see how any good can come from this. But like I said, it's worth it. So please share if you know somebody. So I want to begin this episode by reading to you and over you one of my life verses. In fact, I read this over the women in my group coaching program because to me it is that powerful. It's just a verse that speaks hope into me. It speaks light into me, into my heart every time I hear it. And the fact that I've read the verse before, but I was walking through a very dark, hard time in my life. And this verse, I stumbled across it and it just spoke into me in a totally different way. I'd read it before, but it was whatever I was walking through. That right there, when I read this verse, spoke light and hope into me, and I instantly gravitated to it, and it's one of my favorites now. So, and I actually use this. I used to use this on my intro to my podcast. I would read this in the intro when I first started. So, Joshua 1:9 says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid and do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." And like I said, I've read this several times on here, just in different episodes. I used it in my intro when I first started this podcast a year and a half ago. It is just that powerful to me. So I had to speak it over you. So diving straight into what we're talking about today, this is in a sense part of my testimony. And I'm not even sure if it's going to end here, if it's going to be just this episode, or is there going to be a part two to it as well? I'm not quite sure, but we're just going to roll with it. So, for the longest time, I felt like I was on the fringes of what others would say was quote unquote a normal life. And I want to start this out. I'm going to ask you a question. When was the first time that you remember realizing that something was different about your life? And by different, I mean, maybe not necessarily something very good, not something that someone could say would be in a positive light. When was the first time you remember realizing something was different about your life? And I want you to think about that. And I want you to think about the emotions surrounding it and just how it made you feel, because it's a pretty powerful moment. For me, it was in second grade. Second grade. I was sitting in Miss Helmer's classroom at Bottom Elementary in Midland, Texas. All my classmates, they were working on their classwork. I remember it so vividly because of the emotions I feel. And emotions will make you remember something 10 times better than just trying to remember something. So that's why you can remember things from your past almost in detail, because there's an emotion tied to it. It could be a positive emotion, it could be a negative emotion, but that emotion just latches onto it and it allows your brain to remember it quicker. That's why it's like you can walk in the pantry and forgot what you go in there for, but then you can remember something from when you were in kindergarten, when you got your new pencil and how it made you feel. I mean, I'm just saying it's crazy how our brain is, but it's all because it's tied to emotion. Unless you're walking in the pantry for something kind of emotional, like double stuffed Oreos, I don't know, but that's a whole different story. So I'm going to get back to this though. For me, it was in second grade. I was sitting in Miss Elmer's classroom. Like I said, all my classmates, they were doing their work. I was facing the wall. The old schools, like the way they used to be built, there were so many windows. And the way this school was built, or the way it used to be built, they redid it, where you had just a wall of massive windows. In fact, there were so many windows, they would paint white paint over a lot of them because it could get too hot. It could let too much heat in, and was very, very bright. But I just remember it's so crazy. I remember facing the windows and just looking kind of at the windows, looking around the room. It was calm, it was quiet. Miss Helmer was an older teacher, and so she had a very old school. I mean, I guess you could say pun intended because it wasn't school, an old school way of teaching. So we all our T's were crossed, our I's were dotted. It was very calm. It was very quiet. You could hear the pencils writing. You could hear erasers scrubbing the pages, the quiet squeaking of the old desks as the kids wiggled around, or even, when the kids are erasing and it kind of shakes the desk a little bit and it squeaks a little bit. I mean, I can remember all these noises that made up what you would say is the a classroom sound, the sounds of a classroom. And that was it. Like, I just remember it. And I remember my head was up and everybody was looking down. And it was interesting because I was getting to watch these kids. But the reason I was doing that, and I remember looking around and thinking, ooh, I bet that other kids don't have a dad. that beats up on their mom like mine. Yeah, that was hard for me to say. But I remember thinking that. And I remember thinking, I bet they don't have to hear the yelling to see the physical fighting and feel the fear like I did. I remember thinking all this. I bet they don't walk through the school door having faced everything that I have faced the night before. And I don't what I don't remember is if something happened that morning or that night before, but it was fresh on my brain. So I'm thinking something must have happened pretty recent. But yeah, I'm looking around the room and just thinking, I bet they don't have a dad that beats up on their mom like mine does. You see, I grew up in a middle class family in a neighborhood where all of my closest friends lived. I had one friend that lived on the street behind me. We had and another one that was like two streets over to the left, another one that was like four streets back. I mean, in my mind, like this neighborhood is every inch of it is etched into my brain because it was just we all lived in the same neighborhood. We rode bikes together all the time. I mean, we were 80s kids. And yes, you see the movies where 80s kids ride their bikes everywhere. That's what we did. We walked to and from school together and then even sometimes rode our bikes and got the little bike locks. Like that was really cool. So we were always together. We'd ride our bikes to soccer practice together. I mean, just all the things. My family and I, we went to church almost every Sunday and most Wednesdays. We were active in the church. My parents helped teach a Sunday school class. I was in all the kids' activities. My brother was as well. And then when he got a little older, he became involved with the youth group. My dad was an accountant for the most part of his life. That's where that he got his degree in accounting on the GI Bill after Vietnam War. And then, but he was also an entrepreneur himself from time to time. He ventured out and did his own business, was very courageous in that. And we in Midland, Texas is the oil industry, the petroleum industry, and it's a boom or bust cycle. And he was an accountant for a lot of oil companies. And then at times he would strike out on his own and try to become something with the oil industry on his own. So it just depended. And then my mom, for the most of my life, was a stay-at-home mom. But then there were times that she worked part-time when it was needed. Sometimes if my dad, he started a new business, she would help him with that. So nobody suspected that that is what was going on behind closed doors. And I know we all say that. You never know what's going on behind closed doors. But that is so true. And when people say that, I recall situations in my life. I'm like, yeah, you're right. People really have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. And nobody suspected because the physical abuse part, when my parents fought, it didn't always go straight to physical abuse, but it did a lot. And when it did, bruises were left on my mom to where the clothes were covered, like where they couldn't see it. It wasn't on her face or not even necessarily on her forearms where things could be seen. So a lot of people did not know what was going on. And I will also tell you this is why it's been hard because I love my dad very much. And that is a whole other story of redemption and forgiveness. He passed away. It was a year ago this past January. And he wasn't always like that. He wasn't always this angry, what felt like monster of a man at the time. When he would get physical, he could be the sweetest guy. And I actually have a lot of great memories with him and of him, but they are eclipsed. A lot of them are eclipsed by the physical abuse that my mom, endured from the time when I was little. The youngest I remember, I was 4 years old. And I have a very vivid memory of things happening. And the thing, though, with my dad was even though he wasn't all bad, he had an awfully big chip on his shoulder and he had a temper to go with it. He always felt like the world kind of owed him something or they were trying to cheat him out of something. So when they would begin to fight, I would begin to shake. I would get sick to my stomach. And not every fight, like I said, broke out in abuse, but a lot of them did. So That's me in second grade, realizing for the first time there's something in my life that is quite abnormal, and not abnormal in a cool, quirky way, abnormal in a way that we just don't talk about it. Now it's more open now, but guys, this is in second grade was 1985 for me. I'm 45 years old, so I was, I grew up in the 80s. I was born in the 70s, but grew up in the 80s. And even then in the 80s, just things were not talked about. So let's skip to fifth grade. And another memory of this, and the reason I'm telling you this is because I want you to understand what it means, like how I felt like I was on the fringes, even though maybe it was hidden fringes because people, like I was in this normal society. You couldn't really tell that our family was, that's what was happening, but it felt that way. And then you'll see. So skip to fifth grade with me. And it's a moment I'm about to leave for one of my best friends' birthday slumber party. That was a big thing back then. And we all had slumber parties at our birthday party. Our our poor parents, because like all these girls. Anyway, it was her birthday party, and me and my whole group of friends, the ones I was telling you about, my friend that lives over here behind me and the friend that lives over there on this side, all of us, I mean, the whole group of friends, we look forward to this for weeks, for weeks. Like as soon as she would announce, hey guys, and we all would do that. Okay, now it's a slumber party at my house. Now it's a slumber party at her house. So it was, it was a big thing. But as the years went on, and I talked to you about second grade, me realizing something's not quite normal. The fighting between my parents got worse. You might think, well, how could it get worse? It got worse. My mom began to fight back. And that made my dad even angrier. And I just want you to understand there is a mentality like with when there's an abusive relationship. My parents got married very young. My mom was 16 years old when she got married. She got married because she wanted to. It wasn't anything that my dad got drafted for Vietnam. They moved up to Washington, D.C., all the things. So she got married very young. And then after she was married, realized very quickly that my dad had a bad temper. But at the time, didn't know that you could get out or how to get out. She loved my dad and really wanted to work on it. So I guess in her way, it was like, well, if we're going to make this work, so she started fighting back. Okay. So the fighting got worse. And I will tell you, by fifth grade, the fighting had reached its pinnacle, its climax, as far as how far as the fighting went for my parents. It was happening more and more. It was getting more and more violent. There were things that my dad, there were a lot of threats to not just physical harm, but let's move beyond that. And I'm not really going to get into the details of that, but I was about to leave for the party, the birthday party. Like it was time to go. My mom was supposed to go drop me off, and they began to argue, and then they began to yell. And I knew what was coming next. I knew, okay, it's about to break out into a physical fight. Somebody's going to do something, and it's going to turn into this altercation. And I didn't want to leave. I felt like I had to protect my mom because I felt like if I stayed in the room, and I started noticing if I stayed in the room, my dad was not as bad. It didn't stop him completely, but he was not as bad. And I wanted to make sure my mom was okay. I wanted to watch her and make sure she was all right. I couldn't physically get between her and my dad, but I knew my presence in the room would quiet things down a bit. And so I didn't want to leave. I began to cry because I'll be honest, I began to fear when they started to fight at this point in my life that my dad was going to eventually kill my mom. There were some things that had happened, and I think just fear growing inside me from the time, like I said, the very first time I remember them fighting pretty bad, I was 4 years old. So now I'm in fifth grade. So all these things were just welling up within me. So I began to cry because I had this fear that my dad was going to ultimately hurt my mom to the point she couldn't recover from or would kill her. Very, very dark thoughts for a fifth grader to have. Now I see it. At the time, that was my normal. He had never tried to kill her in the past. It wasn't that, but my fifth grade brain just thought it can't get much worse than what's happening. without this being the next step. So I'm just trying to tie you into why I thought that. Now I remember also I'm ready to go to the party, but then I didn't want to go. I'm in tears. I have my sleeping bag rolled up, my pillow, my little overnight bag, with my pajamas and change of clothes and my friend's present ready to go. And I remember my mom telling me that she's going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. It's going to be fine. I'm going to go hang out at Granny's house. Granny was her mom, my grandmother. I'm going to hang out at Granny's house and we're going to be there until things calm down. It's going to be fine. And I remember she tried her best. And see, guys, at this point, I started having a lot of stomach issues, obviously, because the nervousness was getting so bad. They honestly thought I had an ulcer for a long time, and I didn't, but it was just the anxiety, the craziness, right? Um, so the thing is so she drops me off, right, at my friend's house, walks me to the door. She's friends with my mom, my friend's mom, like they're talking. And I'm like, you could tell I had been crying. And I get inside the house and I'm actually scared at this point to leave my mom. She urges me to go in. And my friend's sweet mother, she's like the sweetest lady. She saw me crying and she asked what was wrong. And I told her, well, my parents got into a fight. And, I just kind of made it sound very generic. They got into a fight before I left. And I remember she sweetly hugged me. She reassured me, oh, it's normal for parents to argue. That's just normal. I know sometimes it doesn't feel good, but parents argue. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. But obviously, I know that she didn't know just how dark it could get in regards to my parents fighting. So, about another year down the road, my parents divorced. It got to the point me and my brother would beg my mom to divorce. The arguing and yelling, it didn't stop. Um, the physical abuse did stop, but the arguing and yelling didn't stop. And the divorce, it was not anywhere near amiable. It was bad. It was always said it was the World War III of divorces because we thought, oh, they're going to get divorced. It's going to be fine. And it was not. So with all that being said, I was very angry, but I didn't know it. And I packed it down because I felt like emotions were bad. I felt like anger was bad because if emotions take you to the level like it did with my parents, you can't trust emotions, even if it's validated, even if it's like a quote unquote bad emotion like anger. And anger's not bad, but what we do with anger can be bad. But I didn't trust. Obviously, I didn't trust emotions. And you can sit here and probably go, well, yeah, nobody would after going through that. So I would just pack it away. I never saw myself as somebody just packed it away. So let's skip to my teenage years, right? There was a lot of turmoil between sixth grade and then becoming a teenager, lots of instability in my life. My mom trying to find her footing after the divorce. She only had a high school degree and was very hard for her to find a job to try to support me and my brother. My dad had child support, but it was just very hard for all of us. So we're going to skip to my teenage years. We're going to skip to the point my mom is now remarried. She remarried a very great, gentle man. He's been a blessing to her life, to our lives. Things were more stable, yet the hurt within me, all the things, it was growing because I refused to handle it and I refused to look at it and hand it over to God. I mean, at this point, guys, when I was younger, all the way up till probably about sixth grade, I worked hard on my grades. I wasn't always a straight A student. I was AB, but I worked really hard. And in fact, I tested out to be in honors, math and science, all that stuff. But with all that, all the things that were happening and the turmoil of my parents' marriage and then divorce, and once I became a teenager, I could have cared less about my grades. And I began to seek out different things. Like I sought out parties. I loved to go to parties in high school. My junior year, I really started hanging out with people who went to parties. And I loved how the alcohol made me feel carefree. I loved how it made me feel brave. It was a numbing effect, right? We know alcohol is a way of numbing emotions. And I didn't realize I was even numbing anything. I just thought I was living it up. I mean, And then, of course, my first serious relationship, even though I'm looking like, why was serious relationship? I was a junior in high school, but I was so eager to have a boyfriend because to me, it felt like, well, if I have a boyfriend, then that must mean I'm important, that nothing's wrong with me. So my first serious relationship with a guy, and I bet you can guess it wasn't healthy. I fell way too fast and way too hard for him. I wanted a more serious, stable relationship. We're there for each other. And he didn't. I mean, we're in high school and he didn't. But I would not allow, like, I was like, no, we're just going to, even though you don't want it, the serious relationship, I kind of do. We would never break it off. So it was a very dysfunctional relationship. And I allowed myself to get mistreated over and over again. And it became another new normal for me, just like my childhood. It was normal to grow, even though I knew it wasn't normal. I adapted to it. I was like, I know other kids do not grow up in a household where this happens. I mean, there are other kids out there that do, but the majority of people do not see and face what I face, right? They've not heard their mom yell for them to go call the police. So I just, even though I knew it wasn't normal, I adapted to it. And I was like, but this is just this is what it is. So it's going to be my kind of normal. So then I get into a very dysfunctional, a very toxic relationship. And I was in a relationship where I thought I loved somebody who did not love me back at all. And that was my normal. That was my new normal. And so then when finally my heart was, the relationship got to the point, it could no longer continue. My anger had grown so much, but I was a champ at packing it down. And this was kind of my story, most of my high school life and early college years. So I know a lot of people look back at high school and have fond memories. I really don't. I allowed, you know, I just allowed emotions to kind of run the day, even though the crazy part was I didn't trust emotions. I just thought, you know, this is how relationships are. They're dysfunctional and this is just how this works. And it caused a lot of chaos in my life. So I don't look back at my high school and think, oh man, those were the best years, or not really even the best years, just that I did so well. I had so much potential and I just kind of, whatever, just wasted it all away. So the anger was growing. I was angry at myself. I was angry at my parents. I was angry at the situation I was put in. I'll say it, I was even angry at God. Like, we went to church, we did all the right things. I used to take my little envelope to church and tithe all the things when I'd get my weekly allowance, all these things that we check off and we say, I'm doing all this. Why am I in, and I was like, why was I in the family I was in? But I was a champ at packing it down, because emotions are bad, even though I was letting emotions run the day. I mean, feeling angry at somebody else, when you do that, it makes you do awful things, right? Especially if you're feeling angry at somebody you love, you'll end up doing awful things to somebody you love because that's what anger is. That's how I saw it. And anger needs to stay away. Yet the thunder rolled within. It rolled within. It was within me. It was within my soul. It was in my mind. It was in my heart. And that thunder was rolling. That's the best way I can explain it. I was thinking about that this week, about just some things. And when that phrase came through, the thunder within made me realize that's what was happening. Emotions are bad, even though there's all this thunder just rolling and you can't contain it. And I felt like a loser. I felt like a loser most of my teenage life, starting into college. I felt like most things that I ever tried for, that I ever worked at, well, they just fell apart because it was me that was doing it. I expected things to never go my way. I mean, why would they? Look at how I started out in life. Look at how I lived most of my childhood and then most of my young teenage life. Why would anything ever go my way? If you start out that way, there's no way you can end up on a good note. I thought I was broken. I believed I was broken. This is just who I am. I'm broken. I'm screwed up. I'm all sorts of jacked up with the emotions. Yet, God. God. He never left my side, even in the moments where I didn't seek him, even in the moments where I could have cared less. I mean, I grew up learning about all the Bible stories. I knew about God. I was even baptized in third grade. I believed that Jesus is the Son of God, all those things. And I believed it. And I loved God through all of this, but I didn't seek him out. I had the foundation, but I didn't care anymore. I didn't seek him out. I didn't want to know him anymore. I just felt like he was just this entity that's far away, that's just watching, that's just allowing things to happen. And he's like, if it's a hard day, you can just pray to me. That's great. But that he doesn't lean back into you. I didn't even know what that meant. Lean into God, and he'll lean into you. What the heck do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean he's going to lean into me? I mean, now I know. When you lean into God, be prepared because he will lean back into you. He will change who you are as far as like how you see your life and how you live it. I mean, but like I said, I did all the right things, all these things. I knew God, I knew the foundation. I just didn't care. Yet, God never left my side, even when I didn't care. Even when I didn't care. He protected me from so much that I know there's things that he protected me from that I didn't even realize. I mean, some of it, I jumped straight into trouble. I sought it out, right? But there's so much he did protect me from. Even when I welcomed recklessness, he still protected me. He kept so much at bay. I see it now. I see it now through the eyes of a 45-year-old woman. I see it now because yet God, he never left my side. He wasn't waiting for me to ask him. That's the incredible part. He didn't say, well, I'll only help you out when you ask. I mean, does he do that? Yes. But that's not his only story. It's not like I only help out when you ask. Oh my goodness, that's not who he is. He is such a kind and gracious and good God. We don't even know the stuff that he does for us. I mean, that's one of the things when I pray is like, God, I want to thank you for the blessings in our life that are seen and unseen, that we don't even realize how he's blessed us. But he kept so much at bay, so much at bay. So here I am now. I'm going to fast forward to a little bit, and I'm a young mom. My oldest is a little baby. So I'm kind of fumbling around here because I just want you to know I grew up and I got to the point where I didn't trust the church for quite some time. I mean, church hurt is what they call it now. I don't know if there really was a name for it back then. I just didn't trust the church because some things that had happened when I was younger, and I always loved God. I always knew people are flawed. They're going to mess up. They're going to say and do stupid things. I knew that wasn't God, but I allowed that to keep me out of the church and to grow a relationship in a healthy church. But God spoke to me as a young mom. Now I'm a young mom, and I knew that this anger, this quiet thunder, this thunder within was destructive. This anger that I had. I had a sweet little boy, my oldest. I needed to get better for him. I didn't feel like I was worthy to get better for. It wasn't for me. I don't need to get better for myself because who am I? Whatever. I needed to get better for him. And so as a young mom, first time mom, we moved back to my hometown in Midland after we had our first baby. And I remember we were sitting at a red light there in Midland, Texas. And I just happened to look over and to my right, and there was this church down the road. It wasn't there when I was growing up in Midland. And when I moved off to go off to college, and then, I was gone for 10 years before I moved back. And so it had since, been built, and it had grown. It was growing really fast. And I heard good things about it. And for some reason, I just looked over at it and became curious about it. And I remember sitting at the red light, looking over at the church, and something in me, well, not, I know what it was. It was God, told me, you just need to go visit. Just go visit this church. So a few weeks later, a very nervous and apprehensive young mom visits the church. And I'm going to tell you, I walked in those doors looking for anything that would give me evidence to turn around and run the opposite direction because all these church people are going to be judging me. Because I did grow up in a church where there were several things that had been said. My parents divorced. I grew up in a broken home. Divorce was not common back in the 80s. It's not like it is now, where no big deal. It was a big deal, especially in a conservative town like Midland, Texas. It was a big deal. And there was a lot of things happening in my life. And so I felt judged. And I probably felt more judged than what was really actually happening. But at the time, being a young teenager, that's how I felt. And so I hung on to that. And then things that were said, I latched onto it. And so you have church hurt, right? So I'm walking into this church nervous and apprehensive. And like I said, I was looking for anything that would give me evidence to turn around and run the opposite direction because you just can't trust Christians. You can't trust them. They're going to tell you one thing, they're going to say another, or they're going to do another. I mean, they're all fake. All this stuff is scrolling through my mind. So of course, my mind is going to try to pick up any evidence. See, look at what they said there. Look at how that person looked at you. And so I'm walking through it and I'm like, but I really wanted to sit down and just go to the church. So then the pastor comes out and he preaches, and I don't even remember what he said. I wish I knew the exact date of when I attended, because I would love to go back on their website and find it and listening in. But whatever he said, God allowed Patrick Payton of Stonegate Church in Midland, Texas. He's no longer the lead pastor there. He ended up becoming mayor for a little bit. But whatever he said in that sermon, God allowed him to speak truth in healing into me. I mean, this Patrick guy, this preacher guy, he was real. He didn't mince words. And that is exactly what my heart needed. He taught from the Bible, turn here, turn there. We're going here, we're going there. I learned. So, I mean, I wanted to come back. All of a sudden I craved it. I learned so much. I grew to love the church again. I began to crave God's word. And oh my goodness, I actually found myself signing up to help out in the children's department. Who is this person? Right? I wanted to know more. I began to crave more, all from sitting at that light and God telling me in my heart, you just need to go. I know you have no reason to go, but for whatever reason, I became curious and said, you know what? For my son's sake, we need to get involved back in church. We need to get more involved. And maybe it is the foundation. It probably is the foundation I grew up with, right? But whatever it may be, I listened and I went. So from there, my journey slowly grew into me leaning more into God. Like I said, what the heck does that mean? But I learned you lean into him and he will lean right back. You depend on him and you say, I can't get through this. And he says, I'll get you through it. I know. But I'm also going to tell you this about God. He's going to get you through things that you never lean into him for. Trust me. Because God has revealed to me in all the times in my life, even that little second grader sitting in her classroom, realizing that something about her life is different, that her life is on the fringes of what society would say is normal. God said, I was right there. I was right there. That time you wanted to leave for that birthday party when you were in 5th grade and your parents were about to bust out in another fight and you wanted to stay because you felt like you needed to protect your mom, but all you wanted to do was go to the slumber party and have a normal childhood because you're sick of it. I was there. I was right there. Even though you didn't ask me to be, I was there. So my journey grew into me leaning more into him. From there, I discovered my Christian life coach. I mean, fast forward years, my Christian life coach, I found her. God used her to reveal to me about my emotions, that being angry isn't bad, that emotions aren't bad. But if you just keep packing them down, then they become something bad. Then they become something icky. They fester and they turn into something that's not what God intended. So through her wisdom and guidance, I began to dig deep and find more real and more real healing, deeper healing with God through finding her. It's like he needed me to find her to say, okay, all these emotions that you've been pushing down, yet they're rumbling around within because I do have a temper. And from that, I thought, well, here we are. I'm just going to, it's just going to be another replay of what I grew up with. I'm going to be a mom that's awful, that's scary. I found myself yelling at my oldest when he was little. It scared him. And I never touched him, but I mean, I would just yell and then I'd walk away in tears and go to bed at night, just consumed my mom guilt because I didn't know how to handle the emotions, the frustrations, the fatigue that came with being a mom. And I just thought my first go-to was anger. And then with that being said, then I was ashamed of anger because anger is bad. Anger makes you do bad things. So if you do this, then you're a bad person. So the enemy was telling me, you're a bad person. You're a bad mom. You're broken. You're beyond repair. Gosh, don't you remember even back when you were 4 years old, seeing your parents fight and you get physical for the first time, one of your first memories as a 4-year-old? How about when you were in second grade? I mean, the enemy was, God, as a mom, he spoke so much into me and I began to believe it. So God allowed my life coach to cross my path to help me with that and to help me to understand that not only are you, that's not true, that you are a good mom, that you aren't a failure at things and you're going to fail at things. It doesn't mean you're a failure or a loser. You know, there's going to be times you show up to work and you just don't do your best job. It doesn't mean you're a loser, you know? And so he allowed her to come to my life to heal me in so many ways and to show me the tools I needed. Biblical scripture, all the things that go back to him, it all goes back to him. So I began to dig deep and I got more healing with him, guys, because our God does not want a fake Sunday school answer approach to him. Tell me what I want to hear versus what you want to say. He needs me. He needed me, Carrie Irvin, who grew up in a home where domestic abuse was prevalent, who let go of all her dreams because she thought she wasn't worthy of dreams. How could somebody with her background and all the things that she's seen in her life ever have a dream and actually make it come true? Who let other people, this lady, Carrie Irvin, who let other people treat her bad because she didn't feel valuable. She put all her value in their hands. Carrie Irvin, who didn't trust emotions and didn't know how to set boundaries with other people because if you're angry with somebody, then you're in the wrong 100% if you're angry with them. All those things. And also Carrie Irvin, who was angry with her dad most of her life, but pushed the anger down because she felt like anger was evil. He needed all of me to show up. All of that. The good, the bad, and yes, the ugly. All of it. So I did. So I did. And friends, it changed everything. In Joshua 1:9, it states that I will be with you wherever you go. I will be with you wherever you go. And friends, if that is not the truth, that right there tells you I'll be with you wherever you go. And just like me remembering all those times, I wasn't even leaning into him and he was still there. God was with you through all the mess, through all the ugly parts of your life that you don't even want to tell another soul, not even your spouse or your best friend. He was with you through all of it. He knows and he sees it all, and he was with you, and he still is. Through all the mess that was, maybe whatever you're going through right now, and whatever the enemy has told you that your future is going to look like because of your past, and maybe whatever you're walking through right now, God says, no, that's not how it has to be. I'm right here for you. I will be with you wherever you go, wherever you go. And I want you to know that if you've ever heard that saying that nothing is too dark or too beyond repair for God. I mean, I know it's kind of cliche now, but it's so true. There is nothing too dark or beyond repair. And it is true. You know, I'm not qualified to help other women learn how to ditch fear through one-on-one or group coaching. I'm not qualified to do that. I mean, who am I to show up to teach them how to lean in closer to God? I mean, it took me, and not until my adult years to really realize that, to come into that, to walk into that. Who am I? But I don't qualify myself to do this. God qualified me. He is the one who qualifies. Nothing that I could do or say can make this happen. I don't earn his qualification. He says, I need you to do this. And you have a story that can help somebody else. He's the one that does it. So I'm telling you now, if you're listening to this and this is speaking to you, I want you to know that no matter your story, whatever you have walked through, or maybe you're walking through it right now, Jesus, he wants you to talk to him all about it. He wants you to follow his path. He can take anything that seems shattered or splintered, and he can make it whole again. And he doesn't stop there. He will allow your journey. He will allow your story to help others. Because he says your journey is a hero's journey. And not only because you're the hero of your story, because if you allow God to do his work, you will be the hero of your story. Then you, in turn, can become the mentor and allow somebody else to find their hero's journey. That is how he works. And if you've never prayed for God to heal you, you can start right now. You don't need a formal prayer or to even get down on your knees or, put your hands together, like you're praying. There's nothing wrong with those things, but they're just not necessary. Jesus wants you to come to him and just be. Talk, cry. You can even get angry. I mean, I've even asked Jesus, why did I grow up in the home that I did? What was all of that about? Like, seriously, what was that about? Why did it have to be like that? Friends, come to him with it. He knows you already have the questions. He knows what's in your heart. He just says, just come to me. Come talk to me, please. Friends, he loves you through and through. And your story, like I said, it is that of a hero's journey, and it can help others out immensely. Because what the enemy intended for evil and to destroy, and not just your life, but possibly other lives, God can use for good. And he can not only bless your life, but he will allow the good to bless other lives. He can totally flip it. Yet, God, he can heal and he can qualify you to use your talents for good. You are not too far gone. You are not too broken. Those are the lies of the enemy. You're not even broken. The enemy wants to tell you you're broken. It's just been hard. It's been a difficult road, but you are not broken because you are a child of God. And with that, God says, you're not broken, but I can help you get up, back on your feet, shake that dust off, and we can start walking through this together now, together. So if you're feeling discouraged, I want you to remember that God, he hasn't forgot about you. It can feel like that at times. God, you forget about me down here. He hasn't forgot about you. Instead, he's waiting for you. He always has been. Just come to me. Come talk to me about it. I already know what you've been through. If you only knew what I've been holding back, the things that could have happened. He has been with you wherever you went, wherever you're at right now, and wherever you may go. He just wants you to come talk to him and say, all right, God, I need you beside me. He's always been there and he always will be. So you sit and talk, hands folded or not. Find friends that will help you seek him. But I just want you to know your story is not too broken. It is not too far gone. Nothing beyond repair because it never was broken. God just says, allow me to whatever the enemy is trying to have you keep in the dark, keep in those dark corners of life and shame and guilt and embarrassment and anger, whatever it may be, allow me to bring it to the light. And we'll bring it to the light. And not only will you be healed, but you will find joy, you will find hope, and you will find peace. Because he can and he will. So friends, I hope this helps somebody today. This has been very hard to talk about. because mm, obviously I'm getting to very, very dark and deep places of my past. But if it helps even just one person out there realize that today's the day that you stop listening to the lies of the enemy, then that's what this is all about. So thank you for tuning in. And until next time, friends.